Hi everyone, welcome to Soul Pilgrimage session number 18. And welcome to everyone who's tuning in tonight, and to if you've been following us all along since number 1, so pleased to have you. And I want to let you know that if you've missed any of the videos and you'd like to view them, they're all still available on our Soul Steps page, Facebook page. So just go to the video section and you can find any of the 17 previously recorded videos right there on the page for you to catch up and view the ones that you're interested in, maybe thought you had missed. So for those of you who are just joining in, this is a book club of sorts, and it's based on the book Soul Steps, 52 Ways to Reconnect with Spirit. And this book was written by myself, Veronica. I'm a spiritual life coach, a self-mastery teacher, and a meditation teacher. And my two co-authors, Florence Strang, is a registered psychologist, and Natalie Finley is a mind-body-soul coach. Now, if you want to talk to or connect with either of us, I'm going to put the information below this video. You can connect with our webpage and find out what we do, or you can just chat with us through that information. Okay, so on to tonight's chapter, which is Soul Step number 6, God in Disguise. And this chapter is all about how we experience differences in our life and what happens when we're faced with differences, different people, different beliefs, different ways of life. I want to talk about our biology and how our primal brain and our mind conditioning both contribute to our reactions. But also we are evolving, constantly evolving, and we've evolved long past our primal brain reactions. However, we are still using those reactions and being driven by those reactions. So I want to talk about how we can overcome those innate reactions and learn to use a different part of our brain that is equally available to us, but we have to put some awareness into using this part of our brain. So let's dive in and talk about those two concepts now. So I'd like to jump ahead to actually read the story that I'm referring to that got me to thinking a lot about these reactions that came up in my body during this event. So turn to page 29 if you'd like to follow along. It's Soul Step number 6, God in Disguise. The air was crisped and the snow crunched under my feet. As I lumbered up the sidewalk with one child in my arms and two tugging at my coat, I was returning from my daughter's ballet recital, and our family vehicle was parked between a high snowbank and a brick wall, which left us secluded and out of public view. I could see in my peripheral vision an unkempt man walking briskly up the alleyway. His clothes were layered for warmth and his hair and beard were long and shaggy. He came up to me and asked for money, so I shared with him some of what I had. As he walked away, I ushered the children into the vehicle and began to buckle them in the car seats. Thinking he had gone, I was surprised to see him racing back towards me. He moved so briskly that I found fear rushing into my body. I jumped inside the vehicle and locked the door just before he reached us. He began rapping on my window vigorously and waving his arms about, wanting to get my attention. I wanted to listen, but I knew I had to protect the children and myself. He uttered a sentence or two about marriage. That was really incoherent to me at the time, or perhaps I was unable to process. Safety was on my mind, but something in me wanted me to give him a chance to tell his story, just in case he was God in disguise. I occasionally think of this man, wondering about the experience and the message he had so desperately tried to share. Eventually, I came to see that the message in this memory is less about what he said and more about my perception of the encounter. I wondered why I felt so fearful. An obvious answer was that we were in a secluded area and I felt vulnerable. But there was another element to my fear. That was that this man was somehow different than me, which created a feeling of separation, if I was being honest, an us and them mentality. So two elements were at work in this fear: biology and conditioning. Biology refers to your instinctual fight, flight, or freeze response, which kicks in to literally save your behind when danger is imminent. It told the caveman to run because a tiger was chasing him, and it told me to jump in the car and lock the door. The second element is mind conditioning. It's also a protective mechanism and is carried out by the ego. Its job is to keep you from potential harm. But this kind of danger is usually not imminent. My conditioning promoted our differences and urged me to stay away from a situation that was outside my normal. From a psychological point of view, the unfamiliar is uncharted territory with little or no experience to back up a safe outcome. It's easier for the ego to keep you away from unfamiliar elements with a perspective of separation. I think I read more than I wanted to there. But the two things I want to talk about is the biology and then your mind conditioning. So the biology refers to that instinctual fight, flight, or freeze response, which, as you likely know, is rooted in the part of your brain called your primal brain. It's only a little pea-sized portion of your brain, but it's so responsible for a lot of our immediate reactions in situations. And it packs a lot of power over our reactions in everyday life. So instead of responding maturely to something, we often react rashly. And our primal brain has a lot to do with that. So as I was saying, this is the part of your brain that releases the adrenaline in the body, that tells you danger is imminent. And years ago in the past, way back when, in caveman time, it told the caveman to run because there was danger behind him. And for me, in present time, it told me to jump in the car and lock the door because I felt fear rushing up in my body as a primal reaction. It told me that there could be danger that was imminent. And it's not that this is a bad reaction, it's that in our modern life, this reaction is activated through the primal brain and releasing that adrenaline in the body when there is no immediate danger. And what's happening is we're keeping ourselves from living a full life because we're relying on these old past ways of reacting. So we want to become aware of that and change our reactions to responses. So the second element I want to talk to you about is mind conditioning. And this is also a type of protective mechanism, which is carried out by a concept of the mind, which is called the ego mind. And again, it serves to keep you from potential harm. But this kind of danger is usually not imminent. And our ego mind is protective and defensive and really keeps us from being closer in our relationships, from accepting people for who they are. It looks at things as right or wrong, black or white. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So when we understand that our brains have evolved over time, and that if we're using this primal reaction to lead our lives, then we are going to have many moments of separation and divisiveness. As well, if we're using our mind conditioning and our ego responses without the awareness, then we're going to further have more feelings of separation and exclusion We're going to think that our way of doing something is right and someone else's way is wrong. That's when our ego really kicks in. We're going to feel threatened when someone doesn't agree with our viewpoint. We actually have those primal fears coming up, and we have those strong, angry responses. That's our mind conditioning and our primal reactions of fight, flight, or freeze. So how do we overcome those responses? And one way is to become aware of the evolving brain. So the brain has evolved, and there's been so much research done around our primal response and our prefrontal cortex response. So we want to move from our primal response into using a more effective part of our brain that's more relevant to our life right now, and that is the prefrontal cortex. Now, this part of the brain is responsible for our future decisions. It can make decisions ahead of time for our highest good, for what's best for us. And this part of our brain can help us look beyond the avoidance of perceived pain. So when you feel that response rising up in you, like you have to run away because you're having an argument, you can access your prefrontal cortex that knows you want to use your voice and work through the argument instead of running away or yelling at the other person or saying you're right and they're wrong or getting into the reactive state. Making sense? So just to reiterate, both our primal brain and our biology, our ego mind, defines things as right or wrong, good or bad, and we immediately react to that stimulus. And we want to overcome this way of reacting. We want to develop a response. So I teach a self-mastery class, as I mentioned, and this really is one of the tools of self-mastery. It's learning to, and I've often heard the ego referred to as your toddler response, because you want what you want and you want it now. You want people to do what you want to do. You want people to believe what you want to believe. You want the cookie and you want that cookie now. You want that immediate response. That's kind of your toddler who's acting up and having a tantrum to the present stimuli, to whatever's in front of you. Where your prefrontal cortex, think of that as your mature brain, your adult brain, your parent who's taking care of really those goals, those long-term goals that you have for yourself. It's the responsive brain that we need to access in order to respond maturely in our life. So how are we going to use this information now to help us develop skills to do that? How are we going to use this information about our ego mind conditioning, and our primal brain responses, fight, flight, or freeze, to now move away from separateness into inclusion? Away from personal point of view of what I want, what I think, what I do is right, into a more impersonal life where we are part of a oneness, where we are part of something larger than ourselves, that we can respect others' beliefs, and we can still have our own beliefs, and there's no threat there. And we can expect other countries and the way they run things, and we can still have our own beliefs, and yet there's no threat there. I'm thinking more on a personal level, where we can really take this into our personal lives, where we can take the threat out of, the perceived threat out of our relationships and move into a state of oneness within our relationships, where we can live in more peaceful abiding at our workplace or in our homes with our family. Okay, so I want to read you this quote that I love, and I've used it ever since 2008 when I did the Self-Mastery Teachers Program. But I found out that it really came from Carl Jung's teachings. And he says the ego represents a deep fundamental principle of ignorance. The ego represents a deep fundamental principle of ignorance, which is exhibited in always preferring the unimportant to the important. I love that because just think of any fight that you've ever had. You immediately start going to these little unimportant details. So take, for example, someone's late when they arrive to meet you, when you've decided that you should meet at a certain time. And instead of saying, hey, I feel that you should have been here on time, that is respectful, and telling them how you feel, you start having a big argument about, oh, you're 5 minutes late. No, I'm not. I'm 2 minutes late. Or you're 15 minutes late. Or no, I'm not. You start talking about the time instead of the actual issue, which is your feelings of being disrespected. So the ego makes the important unimportant. And it focuses on the unimportant so that you can be distracted and confused from what's really important, which is mutually respectful relationships, which is accepting other people's points of view while still living a life according to what you think is right for yourself, which is inclusion instead of separation, which is peace and harmony instead of aggression and discourse. So I think that really epitomizes the tricky ego brain. And I know there are many other chapters in Soul Steps where we'll be talking about the ego and how to overcome the ego's response in your life, the reaction in your life. So I want to talk about the impersonal life for a moment. It's a life where you see yourself in everything. You see yourself in every mineral, every plant, every animal, and every other human being. So how do we move into this view of the impersonal life? As I was saying a moment ago, how do we move out of the ego's protective mechanism and the primal brain's response into these feelings of oneness, where we can have a view of heightened awareness and heightened consciousness during our everyday life, even in the midst of all the dramas that go along with living your everyday life, as we all know. So I just finished this weekend a 2-day course, a Reiki Master's course with, I think it was 7 or 8 beautiful women from across Newfoundland and Labrador. They were spread right across Newfoundland and Labrador. And when I was reviewing the manual for the Reiki Master's course, I noticed that it was very relevant for today's discussion on God in disguise. I believe that the things we talked about all weekend were actually talking about this chapter as well. Mastering your biology. Mastering your protective mind energy. So, I thought I would introduce to you the International Center for Reiki Training, the 13 ways that they live the Reiki principles and philosophy. And for those of you who don't know, Reiki is an energy healing, and it uses an ancient healing art, and the type I used was from Dr. Usui, using the greater cosmic consciousness to heal yourself and to heal others. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, is recognizing that greater cosmic consciousness in your daily life and in the lives of everyone that you come into contact with. So these are some of the ways that you can overcome that feeling of separation that's really implanted in us from our ego brain, our primal brain, and our ego mind conditioning. So, number one is honesty and clarity in your thinking. Honesty and clarity in your thinking. So right away, that makes me think of how do you become honest and clear in your thinking if you are into your conditioned ego-mind responses. And number one way to do that is to return to that state of stillness. Now, obviously, meditation is one way to return to that expanded state of awareness. It brings you to a still place from within. It gives you a higher view and a higher expanded perspective of your life, of your thoughts, of your behavior, of the reality that you are creating, so that then you can change it. But it doesn't have to be just meditation. When I think of meditation and the breath, it's about the rhythmic flow of life. Inhale and exhale. And we use that breath in meditation to increase our focus so that we can go from a beta state where our minds are very active to an alpha state where we are in that expanded state of consciousness with a more open heart, with a more understanding of our relation and our connection to other people, to plants, to animals, to our environment. So meditation is one way to access that point of view, but another way is through other rhythmic exercises like jogging, like running, jogging, same thing, cycling, like going for a walk in nature. Let's see, what else? Is there swimming? Just playing golf and being in nature. You know, whatever works for you, what brings you to that state where you have an expanded view, where you can let go of those busy thoughts, where you can let go of your reactive nature, your primal reactive nature. I'm just thinking of other rhythmic things like I've been painting. So painting, the movement of painting, or some really strong physical exercise like chopping wood, the rhythm of the chopping of the wood. Anything that brings you into that rhythmic state, into that alpha state, to an expanded awareness, where you can see the behavior and your reactiveness in your life. Number two, the willingness to recognize prejudice in oneself and replace it with truth and love. Now, I'm going to be saying these things and you're going to say, I already know all that. But do you practice these? I'm asking you to use your stillness. I'm asking you to use your knowledge of the primal brain and the ego-mind conditioning and what you now know is available, your prefrontal cortex, to now see how you're using that in your life to keep you in a state of separation instead of in a state of oneness. So I'm asking you to really have a look at your life and see, are you doing these things? So, number two is the willingness to recognize prejudice in yourself and replace it with truth and love. So, how do you know you're being prejudiced? Usually you are very reactive. You're also trying to force your point of view on someone else. You're probably very upset. You can feel a lot of uncomfortable emotions coming up in your body. So look at those triggers, and you might see the other person being very upset as well because you're trying to maybe force your views on another person. Those are all little and sometimes very big signs that you are in a prejudice of some sort or a bias of some sort. And I want you to take that moment to step back and move into a oneness consciousness view and ask yourself, how can I pour love into this situation? And one way to pour love into the situation is to try and focus on something that you actually do value about that person's point of view. There will be something that you can find, perhaps, or just some way that you can add peace to that situation. And maybe it's just stepping back and not being so reactive in the first place. Maybe it's realizing, hey, I get it. I'm trying to force my view on you. So I'm just going to step back and just be more present with what you're trying to say and listen to a little bit more about what you want to say so that I can understand and maybe see some value in your point of view. Number 3 is compassion for those who have not decided to do this, because you are going to come into contact with many people who are not aware of what it means to expand their consciousness in this way. And maybe they're not ready to do that. Maybe they don't even want to do that. So to have compassion for people who are just not in that space. You can still participate in expanded consciousness. You can still participate in not allowing your primal brain and your mind conditioning to control your reaction, even if they are not. Number 4, speaking the truth without judgment or blame. And I love this one because this is like the number 1 self-mastery tool that I would teach in self-mastery class. It is called first party from the coaching perspective. And it means speaking your truth, how you feel, what you feel about the situation in front of you, from an I instead of you. So instead of saying, you did this, you did that, you're causing this, you're making me upset, speaking from an I. I feel this way because. I did this because. I'm going blank. I can't think of another example. But it is using I. So if you catch yourself using you and blaming and judging and saying you, just try to switch that statement to an I statement. And you'll see that it relaxes. One, it causes you to take responsibility for what you're thinking and how you're feeling. And 2, it relaxes the other person's ego defense system. So that's another way that you can actually bring more peace to a situation, is by switching to first party communication. See, even if the other person doesn't do that, you can do that. That's why we have such a powerful personal responsibility. And that's how we can bring more peace into our life. Because we have all this power within us, and it really, not that it doesn't matter what the other person is doing, but you can still practice this even if the other person is not practicing it. Number 5, respect for the rights of others to form their own values and opinions. And we've already talked about that. Relaxing your ego defense mechanism, relaxing your primal response, so that you can allow for other people's beliefs and values to be in the same situation with you. Allow them to be there without having to change them or without having to make them the same as yours. Number 6, placing greater value on learning from your experiences and inner guidance than on the teachings of authorities. I love this one because it's about relying on yourself and your own values as the authority in your life. Again, that has nothing to do with other people's lives, but it has to do with your decisions about what you say, what you think, and what you do. And that will have a direct effect ultimately on what appears in your life. Because you are the authority of your own life and not something from outside yourself. Number 7, basing the value of a theory or a technique on the verifiable results it helps one achieve. And I love this too. I know a lot of people need lots of evidence why something works and why it doesn't. For me, if it works for me, it works for me. And I will share that with other people to see if it may work for them. Maybe it won't, and that's okay. But I'm okay with using something that works for me, regardless if it works for anyone else. So look at the results you're getting for your meditation or for your walks or for your exercise or for your use of first party, and let that be enough to continue using it. And when it stops working for you, then you might want to find another technique to use. Actually, I don't let go of my meditation. That's something I use every day because it works for me. It actually relaxes my ego. It actually relaxes my reactive state. And it's something I know I can count on. So I meditate mostly daily. Sometimes I do not get to it, but it's an important practice for me, and I incorporate it and make time for it in my life. Number 8, being open to results rather than attached to them. Being open to results rather than attached to them. So when you let go of your attachment to how things should be and what they should look like and what people should say and what people should do, you're going to be able to relax that sense of separateness that you perhaps are feeling because of your ego mind conditioning and your primal brain. I'm actually going to stop there because it goes on. There's a few more that I love to share with you, but I think I'm going to stop at number 8 because I think that's enough to digest. Even if you work on some of those, pick your favorite one. And if you have a favorite one of the ones I mentioned that you're going to focus on working on, I'd love for you to type it below in the comment section to just let me know that this is something that resonated with you, that you think you can work on in life. So I'd like to leave you now with, it's actually a combination of a couple of quotes that really sum up what we're talking about today. An essential part of awakening is the recognition of the unawakened you. An essential part of awakening is the recognition of the unawakened you. So that's what we're talking about. The unawakened you, the part that is reactive, the part that is defensive, the part that is protective. That's the unawakened you. The ego, as it thinks, speaks, and acts, these perpetuate the unawakened state. Release yourself from the ties of human consciousness, emotions that separate, thoughts that blame and judge, actions that exclude and persecute. Rely instead on your divine consciousness, on the divine power within you. Unite your human consciousness and your cosmic consciousness. Unite your personal self with your impersonal self. This is where oneness abounds, because cosmic consciousness is free from all separation. I want to thank you guys for listening all the way through and for joining in every Sunday. We are so pleased with the conversations that are happening because of the things we share in Soul Step and because of the things you share with us. So please continue to tune in on Sunday nights and let us know how things are going. We would certainly be happy to answer your questions if you have any. Just post them on our site. So Florence is back next week, and then Natalie's back the week after that. And in 3 weeks' time, I'll be here with Soul Step number 7, Transcending the Enemies of Your Peace. So good night for now, and I hope you have a beautiful evening.